Fellow auto detailers, welcome to the show that features interviews with today's most successful auto detailers. This is the Auto Detailing Podcast. Here's your host, Jimbo Balaam.
This week's episode of the Auto Detailing Podcast is brought to you by Google AdWords for the modern auto detail business. Now, if you're a loyal listener of the show, you've been hearing the ad run a lot for Google Ads, the Google Ads course. And that's because it is so effective. It is crucial for your business. And in fact, that is exactly what one of the students of the course has said, that this is absolutely crucial. He even compared it to getting just training in general for your detailing business. He operates in the Australia area, or the country of Australia, and he said he's usually dead during the wintertime. And because of this Google Ads training, he's getting 3 to 6 new clients every single week. And in fact, just with 3 calls, he made over $600 in a couple days. Another student of the course spent $40 and made over $1,000 with the help of this course. And so I really wanted to bring in these testimonials to show no matter what your budget was, you can effectively use these Google ad techniques that I teach you in the Google AdWords course at autodetailingpodcast.com/Google. That's autodetailingpodcast.com/Google. If you're looking to take your business to the next level and to smash your competition, you got to head over to autodetailingpodcast.com/Google. On to the show. All right, guys, welcome to another episode of the Auto Detailing Podcast. I'm Jimbo, and today we are going to be talking about a subject that is very, very, very popular. A lot of stuff going on with car coating. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. And just before we start, this is by no means a complete guide to coatings, but rather more of a simple rant on what I'm currently seeing, kind of feeling, experiencing myself personally within the coating market. Just to start off at the forefront, I'll probably say something that you don't like or don't agree with. That's okay. We can agree to disagree. What I'm saying isn't necessarily gospel, and you shouldn't take it that way, but rather my opinion. No one is sponsoring or paying me for anything in this episode. It's a totally non-biased, non-agenda driven, non-paid opinion. I'm a full-time detailer. I run a full-time business. I do play a detailer on the internet as well, but this is actual real life stuff. This isn't speculation. This isn't a bunch of facts that I've just read and don't have any experience with. This is actually real life, on the ground, things that I'm feeling, things that I'm experiencing, things that I have experienced, ways that I've messed up with coatings, ways that I've been successful with coatings, ways that I see opportunities for coatings, and ways that I would like to, that I'm personally going to steer clear of. And whether you want to stay clear of that or not, that is completely up to you. There's people making a lot of money installing coatings. There's a lot of people saying that they're making a lot of money installing coatings, and in fact, not making much money at all, or don't even do this as a business. So if you are a detailer that is currently trying to start your business, start trying to quit your day job to become detailing full-time, you have to be careful of these guys that are playing detailers on the internet and don't really operate a detailing business, or never had, or ran a not so successful one, and now maybe work for someone else. So be careful of that. Again, just something to look for. So where we're going to get started, and I think that it's important to just do a freshening up, is that when we're looking at coatings, people are still a little confused as to where does a coating lie in the protection aspect of protecting your car. And this is also good information when you're trying to sell a customer on a coating. Using that word coating in and of itself may be confusing to a customer. They may be thinking, oh, is that like, or even a sealant for that matter, a sealant, a coating, you never know where their mind's going. They're thinking, oh, like a sealant, like you're sealing the concrete, like you're sealing a porcelain bathtub. You never know where their mind is going to go once you say those kind of not so familiar terms to them. Customers understand wax, so you kind of have to have that as an overlying theme. So how I explain coatings to my customers, or even a sealant, or anything beyond a traditional wax, especially a paste wax, because that's what most customers are going to understand. And if you're doing this not as a business, you will still glean a ton from this episode, at least I hope. So there are three, essentially, and again, this isn't going to be a super comprehensive, we're not going to get in the weeds with a lot of this genetic makeup of coatings. We're not going to get really technical. We'll touch on it a little bit, but I will not get very technical for two reasons. I'm not that technical of a guy, and two, at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter. When you start getting stuck in the weeds of any aspect of detailing, you start to turn people away. You start to lose people's attention span. And if you're trying to run a successful business, most of the time your customers don't give a crap. So there we go. So again, back to the different levels of protection. At the most basic level, we're going to have a wax. Every customer, 99.9% of customers are going to be very familiar with a wax. Now, that could be a spray wax, a paste wax, a liquid wax, any type of wax, but the overlying generic term there is wax. Then the step up from a wax, maybe something that's a little bit more durable, a little bit longer lasting, and if you use some of the more modern techniques, easier to apply. You have a sealant, so that's going to be a step up in protection. A lot of times, just a little side note, a lot of times it's going to be easier if you're in tune with some of the latest products. It's going to be easier to apply a sealant than, say, like a paste wax. So most times you're going to be telling your customer that you're waxing it when you're really going to be applying a sealant, which is just better for them in the long run and easier for you to apply. So then the next layer of protection that you could apply to a car would be a coating. So that's how I like to explain it to my customers, to break it down in really easy, simple, digestible terms, is that we're just going through the different layers and types of protection that you can put on your car. So again, you can wax your car, like everyone understands. You can put a sealant on your car, and you can put a coating on your car. So again, you can dissect that, and I'm sure we could have a whole episode on the different facets of each and every one of those. But again, to not make this a 2-hour-long episode and to not get stuck in the weeds, because I got a lot of stuff I want to get through, the 3 basic levels of protection are that. So I do want to tie in another caveat, is that coatings are not, and I think people that know coatings pretty well would agree with this, coatings are not the end-all be-all, okay? They're not the greatest thing since sliced bread. They can be super beneficial, but they are not an end-all be-all. And one thing that I see a lot of guys doing is they're tying their business to one specific brand. So whatever that brand is, I see a lot of business owners tying their brand and even putting their brand, giving their personal brand or their company brand the back seat to the coating brand. And the fact of the matter is that coatings are too early on the scene, that most customers, not saying all, most customers aren't even aware of the coating companies that are out. I'm sure you listening could name 10 or 20 coating companies that are currently out on the market. But the reality is that most, again, not all, most customers, in my opinion, couldn't tell you the name of 3 coating companies that are personally out there. Sure, if they're, really big on the form, they may be able to tell you one particular or two coating companies. But in my opinion, the generic population of people getting their car detailed still cannot name 2 or 3 car coating companies out there, even if they understand what a coating is. And then beyond that, I personally have a couple requirements when looking at different coatings and looking at becoming a quote-unquote installer of these different coatings. There's things I hate and that are automatic decision makers that I won't use the coatings, just specifically because I don't like that rule, that requirement, or whatever. So there's a couple filters that I use when I look at installing when I'm looking at different coatings. My biggest piece of advice would be to not tie your brand to one particular coating brand. So I would be an installer of multiple brands of coatings, because there's probably a coating for every payment level that a customer is looking for. So, and I would never want to tie my personal brand to any particular brand that I have no control over. So if you tie your personal detailing brand to, let's say, Coating X, and then Coating X decides to do some shady stuff, or they change up their raw materials, or they any number, go out of business. I mean, any number of these things that could happen, and you've completely tied your brand and your personal brand identity to that coating company, and then they decide to go out of business, or that you learn that they're not the best coating company, or you find out that the coatings that you've installed aren't holding up like they said they would, they don't stand behind their warranties, or any one of these things that totally could happen, or that coating brand decides to cut you as an installer because they don't like one of the other companies, one of the other coating companies that you're now working with and representing and installing their coatings. Whatever that is, I would be very, very careful with tying your brand to any particular coating company. One person that I've realized has actually been doing this really well and offering a wide variety of coatings that I've seen is Scott Perkin, past guest on the show, Scotty's Shine Shop up in Canada. Doing a great job. I see him posting Instagram pictures all the time. He's using a variety of coatings. I'm assuming, I haven't talked to him about it, but I'm assuming that he's installing different brands of coatings depending on customer budget, customer needs, and customer expectations. And it seems like he's doing a great job. So my requirements, and again, these are just my requirements, my filters, whether you choose to adopt them or not, or agree with them or not, that's up to you. I'm just trying to put out the information, my opinions, and all that. My requirements for coatings is the ease of use for installation. They have to be easy to use. I don't want a coating that is going to be too susceptible to weather changes, too susceptible, too finicky with all that stuff. The coating market is becoming so saturated with different types of coatings and all this different stuff. And the ease of installation has to be easy. Because I just don't like that. Installer resources and customer service, just like I push on the show a ton to have a great customer service with my customers, and I encourage you guys to offer that customer service, I have to be getting great customer service from the coating brand. And there needs to be some sort of installer resources for me to tap into. So are they doing any online marketing? Do they have any installer maps on their website, just in case anyone gets on their website? Or do they have pamphlets and flyers and selling material to either pass down for me that I could purchase or give away? Freebies, samples, all that kind of stuff. If there's too much hype around a coating, which is all coatings right now, there's a little too much hype, or if they're over promising, we stand behind our warranty for 30 years. Well, have you tested that for 30 years on a car? Then how do you know? So that's something that is kind of a red flag for me. If it's too expensive, so if I know that it's going to price out the majority of my customers just in my cost, that pretty much is a red flag, and I'm not interested in that because I don't want to have a bunch of money tied up in having to keep stock of a coating that's super expensive if I'm never going to be selling that to my customers. So again, if it's too expensive, and too expensive would be if it's going to be upwards of $200 to $250 per application or per car and a half, that's pretty expensive, in my opinion. If there's territory blocks, so if you can't have an installer within 5 miles of you or whatever that is, I think that's totally stupid. There's not territory blocks on detailers, and we have to find different creative ways to make our business stand out from the rest, and it should be the same for whoever's installing a coating. Another one would be having to fully correct a car before coating. Now, I will say that Richard Lynn has some very interesting looking coatings that I have personally not tested. So I have no idea how they are, but he's been posting some very interesting pictures about laying down a really thick coating that actually fills in all the defects. In my opinion, I'm not really sure what the longevity of that coating is, but that is, in my opinion, I think huge, because a customer that in future hears of coatings, likes the idea of coatings, wants coatings, doesn't have a budget for a coating, or doesn't have a budget to get the car fully corrected and then coated, this coating would still be a great option for them. So that's kind of, again, that's Richard Lynn. That's one of the coatings that I'm probably most interested in right now, to be honest, is one that fills. Again, I'm not going to get too caught up in the weeds of how that works, how it fills. Is it bad that it fills? Is it good that it fills? What are the properties that make up the fillers? I'm not getting there. I'm not going down in the weeds. I don't need to know that right now. Again, a coating company that's going to be overpromising, underdelivering is a red flag to me. And again, I just see so many guys that are attaching their personal business future to the name of a single coating company. I would just highly suggest to use multiple brands, be a multi-installer of different coating companies. And here's a big requirement or a big red flag. If one of the coating companies doesn't like that you install other coating companies or other coatings and offer a variety of coatings to your customers, don't use their coating. Why do they only want you to use their coating? That makes no sense to me, and I honestly think it's kind of stupid. Some of the advantages to coatings, there are guys making huge profit margins on these coatings. Not only installing the coating themselves, but also the correction work that most times needs to be done before the coating can be installed. There is money to be made. There are huge margins in a lot of these coating companies. You can, usually between $100 and $150 for the coating, sometimes even less. There's coatings out there that you can buy a bottle for $50 to $75 and get 2 to 3 cars out of them. So there's definitely huge profit margins to be made in the coating company. And if you are a detailer running your own business, I definitely would be looking into coatings. Another huge advantage is it is better protection for your car. How does a coating protect, or how is it better than, say, a wax or a sealant? It's going to make it easier to clean, longer durability from harsher chemicals. Coatings provide a thickness to the paint above the clear, as most of us know. Think of it as a bigger, this is how you can explain it to your customers too. You have to think of a coating as a bigger or thicker barrier than a wax or a sealant, especially a wax and a sealant. So, again, not going to get into the weeds and talk about microns and all that, but a coating is a thicker barrier, a harder and thicker barrier than a wax or a sealant. So it's going to be harder to penetrate, harder to abrade, harder to well, whatever, than a wax or a sealant. And where I could see this come into play was I had a customer the other day that left their car sitting by LAX airport for 5 weeks, came and picked up his car and had some sort of chemical etching into the side of his car that actually ate through the top couple layers of his paint. And I figured this out because he thought it was cement on top of the paint, and then after looking at it and really cleaning the paint, I came to the conclusion that it was actually something that had been splattered on the paint, and actually had begun to etch this way through the top layers of paint, because I could see the reactions and in the paint what would look like something splattered on it and then had a reaction to it and actually ate its way through. And this was a situation where, and I even told him of, this is where a coating could be very beneficial, and this is where a good sales opportunity would present itself when trying to sell a coating to a customer, is that in the very unlikely event that some sort of chemical etching would happen, like it did for this guy's car, a coating would probably, who knows, he didn't know what the chemical was, so who knows if the coating really could withstand it, but this would be one of those cases that a coating may have had a dramatic made a dramatic difference for this guy versus having maybe just a wax or a sealant on his car. And the fact that maybe that whatever chemical that was may have penetrated through the coating, but not been able to penetrate the actual clear coat and base coat on the car. Again, it was a lease. The guy's going to have to go to a body shop now. It's going to have to be repainted. If you want to steal that story and use it to help sell a coating to a customer, go right ahead. But that was kind of an eye-opener for me. It's like, wow, this is where a coating could be very beneficial, especially on leases. It's important to note, coatings are the new quote-unquote clay bar, not literally, but figuratively. It's the latest, and what I mean by that is it's the latest technology. So a lot of guys are asking, well, why is everyone obsessed with coatings? Why are coatings the new hot button? Why are they the new hot topic? Whatever. And we as detailers like the new shiny, newest polishers, newest wax, newest sealant, newest this, newest foam gun, newest wheel cleaner, newest. And the newest, getting the most attention right now, is coatings. So that's why coatings are so hot, because we as detailers like the bright shiny objects. There is a little side note to think about that most guys don't think about, and that's the long-term health effects of installing coatings. So I guess another one of my requirements, or something that I'm more interested in, is and I don't know if this is possible. I'm sure you'll be able to think of a couple brands that are taking this stance towards it, and I just haven't looked at the chemical makeup of their coatings to see if this is even possible, or if it's just a marketing ploy. But I, in my experience, have dealt with coatings that smell really, really nasty. Really nasty. And you'll see most guys wear protective masks to be protecting themselves, and gloves and stuff like that while applying these coatings. So something to think about is the long-term health concerns of dealing with these chemicals called coatings. So I look for a more eco-friendly, water-based coating versus a ethanol-based, which most of them are. Another thing to note, the hydrophobicness doesn't mean heavy protection. Water sheeting directly after applying a coating is honestly just it's just straight silly. Obviously, if you lay down any wax, any sealant, or a coating, and right away did a water bottle test, chances are it would sheet right off. A big misnomer is that coatings do not prevent spiderwebbing. Coatings do not prevent spiderwebbing. It still happens if you don't take extreme measures to prevent spiderwebbing. Okay. And if you take your car through a tunnel wash and it's coated and you have all those brushes or improper washing techniques, or your customers perform improper washing techniques, or they take it through the car wash, the car will get marred up. It will get marred. It will get scratched up. It will. Now, there may be more durability, and it may not get as much or as many spider webbing as if there were no coating, but it still will be. And this is another thing where I see guys misinforming their clients, which is, I think, going to come back to bite them in the butt, is that they're misinforming their clients. A coating is not bulletproof. It is a heavy layer of protection, better than a wax or sealant, but it is not bomb-proof. It's not bulletproof. It's not a do anything to your car and nothing will happen. It's not a do anything to your car solution. Coatings do need to be maintained, and some even need to be recharged or refueled or invigorated. Most of the time, that is just for the hydrophobicness of the coating and not actually for the protection aspect. So that's something interesting. Everyone likes to see their car bead. If the car's not beading, that doesn't necessarily mean that the coating's not still there. We just equate beads with protection. And at the same time, that doesn't mean anything either. Just because the car's beading up doesn't necessarily mean anything. In my opinion, I try and steer most clients to a sealant over a coating simply because the client becomes more profitable over the lifetime of that client. If you're selling a coating that lasts 2 years, a coating that lasts 5 years, a coating that lasts the lifetime of the car, though your profit margins may be really thick and stacked for that particular client, you don't get to see that client for the next 2, 5, or maybe ever again. So really, when you start to break it down, what is the profitability of that client? Now, again, it goes into clients' needs, wants, and expectations. So if you have a client that wants a coating or needs a coating for some reason, or whatever the reason is, again, this is going to be a case-by-case situation. Again, this is where the selling skills and you being able to decipher and talk with your client really comes in handy. But in my opinion, I would rather sell a sealant and reach out and touch that customer every 3 to 6 months than sell a coating and have the potential of never seeing that customer again. So, and this is kind of going to be all over the board. So I took a bunch of notes and I'm just kind of jumping around from wherever my notes are. When installing a coating, an IPA wipe down is usually not good enough. Learned this from Matthew Kelly with Ceramic Pro. He said an IPA wipe down usually doesn't remove all the wax and all the grease. So use a wax and grease remover like Prepsol to ensure that you're laying down the coating on a completely wax-free, polish-free, compound-free surface. Or if you don't want to, you can't get Prepsol, you can't do all that, just do a simple car wash with Dawn, and you will ensure that you will get a clean surface. There's a little bit too much back and forth on coating primer polishes. To really give an accurate opinion, ideally this would be ideal if you're correcting a car and then you, as a last step, do a polish with some sort of coating primer, and then that eliminates you having to do an IPA wipe down, which or not an IPA wipe down, but maybe a Prepsol wipe down, because if you're doing a wipe down to remove all the wax and polish, you're opening yourself up to marring that paint, especially if it's really soft paint. So ideally you would be able to use some sort of coating primer as a polish right before you apply the coating. But I've seen people that love the coating primer, people that say that doesn't work, you shouldn't do it because the coating's bonding to the primer, not to the paint. But it would be nice. So the verdict's out on it, but it would be nice for those really finicky soft paints to have some sort of primer that you can lay down so you don't risk marring. IR heating lamps, if you're going to be a mobile detailer, I just see it being an added expense. Most commonly used to speed up the cure time for the coating. So if the coating needs 12 hours to cure, but you have an IR heating lamp, maybe you can have that coating cure in 3 hours instead of 12 hours, thus being able to throw down another layer on the car or get that car back to the customer sooner. So instead of waiting overnight for the coating to fully cure, you could stick an IR lamp on it, and the coating will cure in a few hours. What should you, let's go to, do I want to do good coatings for newbies or what to charge? Let's go to what to charge. So, pricing, my favorite topic. Whether we're talking about, by the way, I have in the works a pricing episode with Darren Priest that we're going to be putting out, pricing for just generic detailing services. But this one, this pricing has to do with coatings. So most coating companies will give you a baseline on what to charge per car, per application. Maybe they have, well, you're just going to do the body? Are you going to do the glass? Are you going to do it with the rims? Are you going to do everything? Are you going to do only parts of it? Are you only going to coat the front end? Whatever. So a lot of coating companies will set their base pricing. But one thing that you have to think about is that just like within body shops, a lot of the work is in the prep work. So same with coatings, is that a lot of the time, energy, hassle, effort that's put into installing a coating comes from not installing the coating only, but all the prep work that you have to do before installing that coating. So when people talk pricing and coatings, most of the time they're just talking about what they charge strictly to install that coating only. None of the correction, none of the prep work that goes into it, none of that. So while a lot of coating companies will set specific pricing for each coating package that they offer, and it's kind of their baseline, what they like to use so that everyone's kind of on the same page. Some guys will charge double that. Some guys will charge triple that. Some guys will only be able to charge that. Pricing gets into what kind of market you're in, what your customers can afford, how well you can sell it, which is huge, how much prep work is going into it. And that brings me back to talking about Richard Lynn and the coating that he has that fills. Because if you're installing a coating that fills all the scratching, there's virtually no prep work. And some of the demos that Richard has done, it's literally wash the car, install the coating. Again, I don't know how long that coating lasts or any other info on that. But a lot of the price of a coating comes down to how much prep work it is. I was just talking to someone yesterday who owns a body shop, and he was like, yeah, you can usually paint a car within a couple hours. And I'm like, wow, why is it so expensive to paint your car? He's like, it's all in the prep work. You got to make sure that car is prepped to the T before you lay down some paint. Well, it's no different it's different, but in the sense of prepping and then installing something, it's no different than that for a coating. It's all in the prep work, getting the paint completely perfect, wiping it down, getting it clean, and then installing the coating. Something important to note, you don't always have to coat the whole car. How about just, if you're breaking into the coating market and you're trying to hone your selling skills, how about just upsell to the front windshield for an extra $50 for your regular customer that comes in for car washes or wash and wax or whatever? Why not just sell them, hey, there's this thing, it's kind of like Rain-X, but it'll be better for your, during the rainy season, you won't have to use your wipers as much. It's $50 extra, so it's a low barrier to entry for your client. How about we install it on your windshield? Or maybe even for free. That's up to you, but I would always try to get paid for it. And then once they see the effects of the coating on their windshield, then it may be an easier upsell to, hey, we can do this to the rest of your car. Or what about coating the rims on a Mercedes or a BMW or a car that produces heavy brake dust. Hey, we could do your rims for $25 each, $25 each rim, and you're going, oh my gosh, that's so cheap. Yeah, but if you don't take the rim off, it's really not that much work. And these are just numbers for numbers' sake. Again, charge whatever you want. But the point is to get your client into a lower barrier of entry at a lower price point to get them to show the benefits of a coating, and then from there upselling them to the rest of their car or even multiple cars beyond that. You could even coat the front end of the car, maybe for $150. The side mirrors. It doesn't always have to be. This is the point. It doesn't always have to be a full correction and full coating for $1,500 for a brand new customer. But again, just like with regular detailing pricing, you must know your market and target customer, and be creative. Fit your price. Figure out your pricing accordingly. Maybe. For your market, it is just doing the front windshield for $50 or $100 or whatever, or just coating rims. Maybe it's not the full correction and coating because you're a mobile detailer starting out and you don't have, you don't want to spend 2 days on a car. Maybe you do want to spend 2 days on a car. My only caveat is make sure you're getting paid accordingly. And that's where I go back to, I install a lot more sealants than coatings because my dollar per hour is way higher when I'm installing a sealant or a wax than it is when I'm installing a coating, which could be my fault. But it's also been an easier sell, so I can pump more cars through. I can reach out and touch those customers more often for a touch up on their wax. Everyone will wax their car all the time. A story that I'll share real quick where I shot myself in the foot. I'm still kind of bummed about it. But I had a client with 2 cars, and he was getting his cars waxed or sealed as I was doing a sealant. I would say every month to every month and a half. And I was charging him about $100 per car. Yeah, right about $100 per car to wash and wax them. So, and then I got kind of sucked into this coating craze. This is about 1.5 years ago. Got sucked into this coating craze, maybe 2 years ago. Anyway, got sucked into this coating craze. Really was eager to sell coatings. Wanted to sell a coating to someone, anyone, whoever has money. So it happened to be this client. And then I sold it as, hey man, you're spending so much money washing and waxing your car. What if we coat your cars? It'll be good for a couple years. You won't have to worry about it. Stupid of me, because when I sold a coating for $600 because he didn't need any correction work because the cars were new, well, he didn't have to wax his car once a month anymore. So while he still gets his cars just washed and touched up, he feels like he doesn't need to get them waxed anymore. So I lost out on all that reoccurring money because for a one-time hit of $600 when I could have made that back within 6 months just per car. So pretty stupid. Learn from that. Not a good thing to do, in my opinion. All right. Good coatings for newbies or driveway detailers or whatever you want to call yourself. I would start with Gloss Coat by Optimum. Really easy to use, really dummy proof, easy to apply. It has almost identical application process of other harder to use coatings, but without the worry of seriously messing something up. So the way you apply Gloss Coat is essentially the same as any other coating on the market, unless you're spraying it. But the difference is how quickly that begins to bond and harden on the surface. So Gloss Coat has a lot of work time, gives you a lot of time to wipe off after it flashes, and doesn't really harden up, and it doesn't really become tacky. A lot of these coatings, once they begin to cure, they get really tacky, which is the coating essentially curing, and it gives it, you can just really mess it up. So if you don't have kind of your method down, your system down for applying coatings, and then you go and do a harder to install coating, it does kind of get tacky. And again, if you're not kind of seasoned, and again, gloss coat, you don't have to be you don't have a monthly minimum buy requirement, which is another thing that I stand firm on, that I will not be an installer of any coating company that either has territory restrictions or has a monthly minimum buy requirement. So you have to spend, let's say $300 a month with that company to stay as an installer. I think that's a complete joke. And I refuse to install any coatings that the company has that set. But for gloss coat, you don't have that. So you can pretty much get gloss coat wherever. Runs about $60, and you should be able to get at least 2 cars out of it. But the gloss coat is essentially like having training wheels for your coating applications. Again, I don't agree with monthly buying requirements, which is why I stay away from some companies. Some companies make you keep those monthly requirements to stay as installers. One I really like right now, a coating that I'm really, really liking because it has a lot of similarities to harder to install coatings, as far as hardness, if you're into that. But without the ethanol based, it doesn't have the horrendous smell as some of the other coatings do. There's no monthly minimums, excellent customer service, easy to use, easy to apply. It's very forgiving, can be layered if you want to layer coatings. Could be used auto, marine, home use, and that's Pearl USA. Again, this episode is not sponsored by any coating company. So when I throw out names, it's just strictly for information for you. But Pearl USA is a water-based coating, so not ethanol-based. There's no monthly minimums. And I hope I remember to talk about airplane coatings, because that brings in a whole nother interesting aspect. But anyway, going back to Pearl, it's almost like if you went from gloss coat, which I would recommend starting out because of easy use, and then you could literally end at Pearl USA coatings, because they're so similar, but Pearl is the step up. So they do have and this is from them, I haven't tested this, I have no idea, but they do have a 9H hardness. Again, whether that's true or not, you would have to fact check with them. That's just what they say. So the hardness is there, but the ease of application, the ease of use, and the forgiveness of the coating is a little bit more than some of the similar based coatings as far as protection and longevity. So again, start with gloss coat because it's very, very forgiving and almost impossible to mess up and get high spots. And then I would try Pearl next, because it's still pretty forgiving, but it does, if you leave it on the surface too much, or the temperature is different, or the humidity's out of whack, or any of those factors that could go into how the coating cures, it does begin to get a little tacky. Of course, you don't want to install any coating in the direct sun. If you do get high spots with your coating, so a high spot would be, how do you say this over audio, would be where it looks like the coating flashed a little bit. It just looks, you can see it. So when you lay down a coating and then you do your wipes after it flashes to remove the coating, a high spot would be a place where it looks like a smudge mark. That would be a high spot, like a smudge. The coating, or you didn't wipe that area good enough. If you get a high spot, a lot of time using a light abrasive polish, something like M205, will usually work that high spot down, blend it right in. Yeah, so that's all the notes I have on coatings. Again, not the complete guide, not the end-all, be-all list to coatings, but at least I wanted to get something out there to inform you guys on kind of what I'm thinking with coatings. Some of the brands that I've been messing with, a good area to start. Some stuff to be red flags, hopefully some selling opportunities. If you guys liked this show, you have any more questions, feel free to reach out to me through Facebook. Write me a message there, send me an email. I'll do my best to respond to you as fast as I can. Sometimes with some of these loaded questions, it's just a little bit more than a quick Facebook message, but that's okay. Hope you guys enjoyed the show. Hope you got something out of it. See you on the flip side. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Auto Detailing Podcast. Head on over to autodetailingpodcast.com for full show notes and links of everything that we've talked about today. And don't forget to check out our resources page for a direct link to all the products talked about not only on today's episode, but that I use in my day-to-day detail business. They have direct links so you can purchase and get free shipping right from that page. That's autodetailingpodcast.com. We'll see you on the next episode.